all of you agree with me that this pandemic has caught the world by surprise. Though there has been lots of scientific and advancement, there has been lot of technology advancement, but this pandemic has made us aware more about the importance of public health, being prepared for epidemics, and maybe improvement in the infrastructure in healthcare sector. So all of us have studied about adaptation on maybe in our 4th or 5th class in school, and you know that adaptation is important for survival, and basically it means that you have to become more suited to the environment for the survival. Now you may be wondering what madam is talking about adaptation in the context in a scientific program on COVID. Well then, it is inevitable that there has to be a change, and when there is a change, there has to be a adaptation also. If you see an example in Japan, you know that there are a lot of earthquakes happening. So what do? They adapt and they make change, lifestyle changes, and they have these wooden buildings and which are short and they are resistant to the earthquakes, and they don't have long multi-tiered buildings there. So this is what we are talking about even when we are talking about post-COVID scenarios. Any pandemic usually lasts for 2 years, if you know. And we don't have a crystal ball to gaze into and know that this pandemic is going to end so soon or not, or whether, like I know that Dr. Rangareddy was also telling you, this might not be the final pandemic. We might have more pandemics also coming up. This might just be a beginning. So we have to be prepared for such global emergencies, especially related to the healthcare. Now, the effect of the pandemic has been that there are 3 or 4 measures which has been stressed upon. One is physical distancing. I think we should defer from calling it a social distancing because we can still socialize, maintaining the physical distance. So physical distancing, hand hygiene, and appropriate use of PPE. We have made a lot of lifestyle changes, whether it is in a healthcare worker, whether it is in the public, and or it is regarding our workplace. So administrative measures has been very, very important aspect because you have to have certain policies and procedures, and laying down a policy and procedure is easy, but implementation and sustainability requires the role of administration and the support of the administrative, whether it's a healthcare sector or any other non-healthcare sectors. So physical distancing, as I said, hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene, and face masks have become a part of our life. Availability of personal protective equipment, which can be masks, which can be gowns and gloves, and the concept of universal masking, which we talk about, that is any person coming to a place where, if it's a hospital or an institute, should wear a mask as per the requirement or as per the recommendations. And another very important fact this disease has taught us is about the well-being also, the mental well-being, because this pandemic not only affects you physically, but it also affects you emotionally, and there is a lot of a psychological component. This I am talking from experience where I have worked in the COVID ward from the day it was like started in our hospital from I think mid-March onwards, and I have seen patients, even healthcare workers behaving or going through a lot of stress because of that. There is anxiety in addition to the physical exhaustion, and those of people who have gone, those of us who have actually suffered from the COVID also have also faced these things. So I think mental well-being has become, and psychosocial aspect becomes a very important component when we talk about the pandemics, especially the present pandemics which we are going through. So globally, COVID-19 has reinstated the importance of hand washing. I have never found so much of a compliance with hand wash in our institute as I have seen in the last few months. Unfortunate that we had to come to a stage like this to give us a wake-up call to understand the significance of something as simple as a hand wash, which can go a long way in preventing of infections. Environmental hygiene, including surface cleaning and wearing of the masks, yes. But we should also remember in this pandemic, in this chaos, that there are other HCIs which definitely needs to be taken care of, like our ventilator-associated pneumonia, our BSIs, and urinary tract infections. Like we know that many of us see in our COVID wards, there is a rise in MDROs, there is a rise in ventilated patients getting BAPs. But many times we tend to disregard the airborne infections, and that needs to be taken care of. Whether you talk of HEPA filters, or you talk about air purifiers, or a standalone AHU units, this is a time when should start investing in a good airborne infection infrastructure, because risk mitigation will start with that. If you see the hierarchy of controls, where you talk about environmental, you talk about patient factors, you talk about the administrative factors, risk mitigation makes clear that one of the important aspect is the administrative and the infrastructural changes. It's important that standard infection prevention and control precautions, including transmission-based precautions, are to be followed everywhere. So the key preventive strategies has been universal masking, physical distancing, hand washing, and another important thing is awareness of the infectious diseases and their communicability potential. We should know that, like, yeah, we have been aware of SARS, we have been aware of MERS-CoV, we have been aware of H1N1, and if you see their R naught values are not so high. R naught value is basically the communicability potential. So it is not that high. But if you come to the SARS-CoV-2, it has quite a high potential of infection, and hence an exponential increase in the number of cases occur. So I think the very important thing here we have to remember is that if we talk of infection control, I would talk infection control in the hospitals. Now let's not forget about clinics, nursing homes, and at the community level, because not all are from corporates, and there might be a difference in the implementation and following of the policies in other areas. So I'll just talk briefly about each of these scenarios. Before that, just want to tell about the importance of epidemic preparedness. See, one of the major things which has been taught by this pandemic is that how many of us are really prepared for an epidemic. I'll tell you, like, we are from an accredited hospital, and I'm sure many of you must be having either some form of NABH or JCI accreditation. There is one clause in it which says there has to be an epidemic drill. And we all do it just like a routine. I myself, I know that, okay, I have to conduct it annually, and then we usually take up one H1N1 drill, or we take one Ebola drill, and we do it. This pandemic has taught us that, yes, if you have looked at those points when you have done the epidemics and found the loopholes and addressed them, I think we are prepared better in next coming years. So main one thing is, let's all be prepared, because this is something which is related to infection, and which has a whole huge impact. So something like a disaster drill or an epidemic drill, and epidemic preparedness becomes a very, very important component of any pandemic preparation or awareness. So let me start with the hospitals. So irrespective of any regulatory changes, triaging is going to continue to stay. So your policies or procedures has to be start with the triaging. Normally when you talk about triage, you talk about ER, because you want to know that how much is the criticality of the patient, like how much intervention is required. But when we are talking about triage in a infective cases or in a communicable diseases cases, you have to identify the early warning signs or the trigger factors. So the risk factors which might be there, which includes temperature. So invest in a good thermal scan camera. All of us, I know we do that infrared one. So it's difficult because many times it causes bottleneck when you have huge patients load coming and walking in a hospital. So maybe invest in a good thermal scan cameras and have a questionnaire. It's usually people don't tell that they have cough or cold or they have had a contact, but the more we do, there will be some amount of awareness. Many people self-report also. So some form of, or some app where you can ask them, these are the questions, did you have anyone in your family having any infective cases, was there a travel? Because this is not only for this COVID, this can be for any infectious diseases which might come out later. So this app can be used for those things. So think of those and identify people who have had respiratory symptoms and separate them, make them into some grade. Like I was just telling, maybe have a green channel, like in airport you have a green channel and a red channel. Let the patients who do not have symptoms and not fall into these trigger signs go through that, and the other people can go through the red. Some form of a differentiation where there is again preliminary check and the screening, and they come into the stream or they go into the separate clinics. Also posting posters and signs make you more aware. If you go in any hospital, you will see signs that, okay, wear a mask, don't enter without mask, cloth masks are not allowed, things like that. It Doesn't mean you will have 100% compliance, but it makes you aware. Human mind is like that. The more reminders you have, the more it keeps you aware of it, and maybe you will do it. Just sharing one of the policy and protocol which we have started in our hospital, and I have taken it from my hospital for the paucity of any policies or procedures which I could find anywhere in the international journals, because we are presently going through the pandemic. We have not come out of the pandemic yet, so whatever resources I could get, I have tried to put in this. I think one of the major things is we can have some form of an online appointments that we have to start off with. Have an online appointment. And in that online appointment, you can send a questionnaire to a patient where the patient can say that, okay, I do not have any cough or cold, or I have not traveled, no one in my family had these symptoms or positivity, and then triage them into a grade 1 and grade 2, or 1 and 2 or risk and no risk. And then those who are at risk, you send them to a flu clinics or your fever clinics, and those who are not at risk, they can enter into the hospital. You can also have these self-registered kiosks, which are not a major investment. So some sort of a self-registered, those who have not registered, they can go to a self-registered kiosk and then enter into the hospital and ensure that there is some form of a physical distancing. We do post these queue managers, we do post these labels saying that do not touch the board, do not touch the table. But invariably, you see sometimes in our anxiety, see, patients are all sick. So in our anxiety, sometimes we do close by to the person who is sitting, whether it's a front office person or it's a billing person. So in that scenario, it's better if you can have some form of physical barrier, like a glass one investments, a glass barrier or something like that, and then an online prescription. Patients can take, if they want to get their investigations ordered, they can go to the investigation, give their samples, and then they go out. And patients can get an online prescription also. I think this is one of the things which implemented will definitely help in reducing the contact in this era of pandemic. With the physical distancing can be maintained. Of course, the staff in the OP has to wear masks. Hand sanitizers have to be available, which we see now even in the public areas, have distance between, like physical spacing between the chairs, and frequent disinfecting of these places. That is very important. In the consultations room, as I said again, put signboards or have a digital screen where you can have a scrolling, educating people that if you have any symptoms, please report, maintain social distance, wear masks. Similarly, in the waiting area and the consultation rooms, we have to ensure these things are done. Just sharing a few pictures, like you can have, this is in one of the consultation room where I don't know whether you're able to make out, but there is a glass partition. So this is one of the cardiologist's room. So these are all pictures which have been taken from hospital and not taken from net. And or have some sort of a screen, like the right side one shows a plastic transparent screen. I know in a healthcare sector and a patient is coming to see a doctor, an important part is a patient being examined by a doctor. I think that gives a lot of assurance to the patient. But if it is something which can be avoided, can be done, like patient might have come just for a review, just to take maybe investigations or show you investigation. But if it is required to examine, then obviously patient is a priority, there is no compromise on the patient check, then the doctor has to follow the precautions like wearing PPE and hand hygiene. The another important thing is, I think many hospitals do not have a negative pressure OT. I don't see many people in the audience, but do you have a negative pressure OT in your hospital? You have a negative pressure. So I think Continental is a relatively new hospital, and she is lucky enough that they have a negative pressure. Many of us who have hospitals had for more than 15-20 years do not have a negative pressure OT, because all of us have the concept that OT have to be positive pressure. And I have seen some green hospitals, those hospitals which have come up have a negative pressures OT. So maybe start thinking of that when you construct an OT, those of you who are going for a new one. Or if we have time, we can still have a negative pressure OTs. And if there is no negative pressure OT, at least a dedicated OT where there is an independent AHU. That is one thing which we can think. I know we cannot talk of blocking the OT all the time, our management is going to kill us. But then having a separate AHU unit and having a protocols laid down for its cleaning, because you are going to get cases where they are suspected. They might not be proven, diagnostically proven, there might be radiological COVID, there can be clinical COVID. In those scenarios, you might have to take care of such cases in either a neutral pressure OT or in a negative pressure OT. maybe it's time that as our screening protocol we do for our bloodborne pathogens, start introducing SARS-CoV-2 as also a screening check, that when the patient comes for a procedure or surgeries. Coming to the recovery room, we know that recovery room beds are quite close by. So expand the recovery rooms and have bed spaces in between. That is another change which we might have to make in this scenario where post-surgery patients stay, and make it a shorter time stay, depending on the patient's condition, but shorter time stay. Procedures which are being done, like the cath lab, and endoscopy, bronchoscopy, all needs to have actually a negative pressure, but at least cath labs can have a neutral pressure. And again, as I said, a independent AHU. And for ultrasound and Doppler, have a transparent sheet, because we know that one of the radiologists came to us and they were very worried initially when they're doing all these Dopplers and ultrasound, and they asked us what should we do. So this was the only solution we could think of. Either you put a screen with a hand where you can put inside, but maneuverability becomes difficult, so put a transparent screen which is more flexible, a transparent curtain, and then they can do the ultrasounds, and then this can be cleaned at regular intervals. The phlebotomy section, where you have a huge rush of walk-in patients as well as the patients who just come for the investigations, have a token system. Those of you who already have a token system, absolutely wonderful. Those of you who do not have, think of introducing a token system, a digital one where patient's token number can be announced, not the name, for the confidentiality thing, and have staggered timings for them. Maybe geriatrics and children, they can have some particular timing, and the others can have other timings. So those can be done. And so is the case with ophthal and ENT, which are all high-risk areas. Another very important thing, and the situational approach which has been taught, is this occupational safety for the healthcare workers. Yes, it has always been there. Many of the hospitals do have occupational safety. We all take care of patients who have, healthcare workers who have had NSIs. Our priority is patient, but healthcare workers, especially in this scenario, because we have longer exposure to the virus, close contact with the patients, and we do a lot of aerosol generating procedures, I think this is high time hospital starts investing a lot on occupational safety. Maybe have an occupational safety department. I know we'll require more manpower, but I think someone who should be looking at it throughout the year, providing adequate resources and vaccines. Providing adequate resources and vaccines to the healthcare workers, strengthening it, having a surveillance, regular surveillance, asking them to self-report, quarantining the healthcare workers, making sure that if they require medical services, help them, and encouraging them to report. That is important part of the occupational safety. So occupational safety has to be very much strengthened in the post-COVID era. There are already regulations and advisories coming up from MOHFW, and we already have from ICMR and National Institute of Occupational Health, because it caters not only to the medical healthcare workers but also to the other non-medical healthcare workers. We have a very robust, like I was seeing the regulatories, and there are a lot of regulations given from the government for the healthcare worker safety. Investing also in a good PP. Any PP cannot enter into the system. When you talk about PP, you cannot have a paper, a thing which is not impermeable to water coming inside. So this needs to be strengthened. You should have a PP core group, or you can have some committee which approves these PPs which come inside, and the type of masks. Before the pandemic, no one knew about N95 masks except us. Now I see even in the public, all of us wear N95 masks, because that has been the scare of the this pandemic. And not all masks which have N95 written on it, let me take the opportunity of saying that not all the masks which have N95 written on it are truly N95 masks, so we have to be careful about that. And also want to just say that government has given a GO on 28th of June about not using a valve mask in the public, because a valve mask, when you exhale, it brings out the virus. The person around you is not protected. So I think whenever you see people who have a valve mask, please discourage and give them a mask. So trendy clothes in 2020 is going to be those with all of us wearing masks. In fact, the picture with the mannequin was taken last week. I took it. I just was passing through Jubilee Hill area, and I saw one shop where this center one has, I don't know, because there is a reflection of a light, but whether you can make out, there is a mask on the center mannequin. Maybe that is what going to be in coming years. That was for a lighter note. So coming to the OP diagnostics, the same policy and protocol can be followed. You can have online appointments, have a grading, and then go have a cashless interactions. patient will go to the area where there is sample collection and token number, and the patient can give the sample and go home, and these reports can be either emailed to them, and if you have an app where the patients can put in their OPP number and get the reports, that can be done, and thorough disinfection in between the patients. So that again has to become a part of our lifestyle in our healthcare sector, irrespective whether the pandemic is going to go or not. And again, people have to wear, healthcare workers have to wear masks and hand sanitizers at the desks. This is how you can mark your chairs, like you can say don't sit in between. I'm sure all of you must be practicing it. OT waiting area, make sure that there is a gap, like how we have put here, enough physical distance between the chairs. Something like that needs to be done. Another important factor is visitors. Indian as a culture, we are all very tightly bound, right? One patient and we have 7 attenders. You'll have immediate family, you have extended family, then you'll have best friend, then you have other friends, then you have professional friends. So you see so many people entering in. I think we need to regularize the visitors, have a one visitor policy, only have one patient and one attender only. That is very important and has to be part of our policies in the coming years in the post-COVID era. And for that, I think we have to be very, very strong, because I know many people fight and come inside. So you have to empower your security, make sure that your security has, like he can pick up a phone and call your operations guy or whoever, that this patient is coming inside with so many attenders. In exceptional situations, yes, like if it's a geriatric patient or a patient who needs more than one person to help them, yes. So this roughly about the hospital settings. Now coming to the nursing homes and clinics. Best is that you give a staggered consultation timings, and same the alternate chairs. Risk categorization needs to be done, a screen between the patient and the doctor, and the use of point of care risk assessment based on the patient's condition, which type of PPE, which type of mask you need to wear, and open the consultation doors. Don't keep it closed, so that there is good air changes. It has been seen that with one air change, about 25 to 30% of the viral reduction occurs. So make sure that there is good airflow inside the rooms. Of the less number of people in the lifts, and cleaning of the lifts is also important part now that has also to be incorporated. It may be thinking that we are talking about rehabilitation centers, and we have a lot of these neuro rehab and the trauma rehab centers. But post this era, we will get, like we are getting post-COVID patients who are coming back with a lot of pulmonary symptoms, either bacterial pneumonias or fungal pneumonias. So there is a requirement for a good pulmonary rehab, and even in those areas, again, patient might be a lot of days post-COVID, so screening might be required. There are patients attenders who might be coming in. There will be equipments which might be used, and I forgot to add here, but mental well-being, again here is very important component when you talk about rehabilitation centers. In a community or a primary healthcare center, there are limited resources, but educating the staff and the patient, and patients especially in the local language like in Telugu or whichever state you are in, like importance on hygiene, making sure at least hand washing, soap solution, even if there is no sanitizers. And I'm sure PHCs and all, most of them have good ventilation, because I've seen this, most of them are single buildings. And availability of POCTs in these areas. If some form of a POCT where you can rule in or rule out. It's not just question of ruling in, you have to rule out also sometimes infectious diseases. So availability of POCTs also will help in these areas. Let's not forget about public areas, because this disease has a public health significance. Behavioral change is very important. Even now when you go out, I'm sure many of you must have also observed there are people who don't wear masks. They move in groups. The physical distance is not maintained. So we have to bring about a behavioral change, maybe by conducting small, I won't say camps, but maybe some virtual, some sort of awareness programs. Have a discipline among them that yes, if I don't wear mask, I am infecting myself. I go back home, I have my grandparents at home, who might also get infected. So ensuring that they follow the protocols, and importance of hand hygiene, not just hand hygiene, but the environmental hygiene is equally important. Environmental disinfection, just briefly touching about it, there are many disinfectants which are coming into the market. Make sure that you check them, that they have something against, like we don't have any particular standards as such as that I know of in India, but I think EN standards many of us look at, and they have this emerging viral, action against emerging viral pathogens. Those things are the ones which are being worked off on SARS and MERS-CoV. So they are the approved ones. So have a look at it. Otherwise, there is a lot of literature support, like UVC. Yesterday, I was seeing Russia has now come out with a robo which will disinfect all these museums and all. So use of UVC light also helps. And there are some already impregnate, like anion impregnated materials coming up, which will have some virucidal effect directly. So those are the things which we need to look at for the in future. Facility has to have long-term modifications, like your respiratory ward. Now you might be calling it COVID, but don't close it down. Keep it as an ID ward later. You can there are hospitals which don't have patients whom they admit for measles and tuberculosis. They can admit there. Increase the number of negative pressure room. If you have no negative pressure room in your ER, make one. If you have one, maybe make 2 or 3. And have holding areas. As I said, limit the number of visitors. Post-COVID clinics, of course. And maybe in the healthcare sector, when all the doctors, many of us employees sit together and eat, have staggered timings, divide, have enough space in between, so that all do not sit together, because this has again a high potential. These are the long-term changes which needs to be made in the healthcare sectors and in the hospitals. I know it's a bit expensive to have installation of automatic hand sanitization, but even normal ones, where you have seen the simple ones, no, now even in the malls and all, I think, where they just put with the foot and this comes, so you don't have to handle the nozzle. So such type of more availability of hand hygiene corners, and of course nothing replaces the hand wash, so more wash basins where you can have hand washing availability. And the use of technology. Many of the people have shifted to use of telehealth. We are also talking about telepathology now. So that can be utilized. Maybe not handling paperless cash, paperless transactions, online appointments, and people are also looking at this. Like, we are generating a lot of PPE waste. So people are also looking at if there are any technology where these PPEs can be reused. Until now nothing has come, but a lot of research is going on into this. So I think it is important that we adapt. You know, like dinosaur, if you don't adapt, they become extinct. So I think we have to start adapting to these things. It's not an easy way, it's not a straight path, nothing is laid down as much. Whatever we are every day, like I remember someone was saying in the morning, that every day we learn new about it. One day we'll know that it's a droplet, then we'll think it's airborne, then we'll know that it's not airborne. And virus is changing so much, so we are still learning a lot about the virus. So as it evolves, as the disease evolves, as we come to know about it, I think there will be many more protocols and policies coming into place. As of now, whatever I could think best we can practice out of personal experience, and whatever the literature which I could go through. And most of the literature for post-COVID is on dental. Somehow when I was scrolling through, I found the maximum dental. I think we have to look at maybe in few years, few months, we might get for our healthcare sector also. But these are the references which I have taken.